Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do: to educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's show. So it's the new year, and I have not done a show on change for a little while. And you know, it's interesting. Every new year, because of the field I'm in and because of the friends I have, I get in a lot of conversations with individuals about what they're hoping to accomplish and goal sets and New Year's resolutions and things like that. And to be honest with you, I'm a big fan of any kind of change, and I'm a big fan of moments like New Year's when people are more motivated to change. I know there's a lot of people who, they get tired of people wanting to do New Year's resolutions and things like that. But from my perspective and the work that I do, I am always beyond excited when anyone wants to put effort into change. And so I am one of these people that loves New Year's and loves New Year's resolutions. I have to be honest, though, I'm not someone who does New Year's resolutions in probably the typical way that most people do. And when I coach my clients on change and New Year's resolutions and things like that, my approach is a bit different as well. Now, this doesn't mean my approach is necessarily the approach that everyone should use or that is going to be the approach that a lot of people will gravitate towards. But I do want to share that approach with you today on today's podcast, because at least from my perspective, I do believe that when most people are trying to make change, they go about it in a way that oftentimes will fail them, right? And so I want to just present to you a slightly different model of how people should be changing. And so let's start with this idea of what I would call the to-do scenarios, right? It's basically like most people who are going to approach change, they basically say, I'm going to stop doing this and start doing this, right? It's a to-do list, basically. I'm going to do X, I'm going to do Y, I'm going to do Z, I'm not going to do A, I'm not going to do B anymore, I'm not going to do C anymore. And this is the way that they do things. And in my mind, what we have to understand is that the way the human brain works, it works in patterns, it works in stories, right? It has a particular way of doing things. There's a very, very popular phrase that has now become cliche in the health and fitness space, and that is the idea that brain cells that fire together wire together. And essentially what that means is that when you do things on a habitual basis, when you get up and do the same thing every day, when you eat at the same time every day, when you have the same emotional responses, to the same sort of triggers, your brain gets used to behaving that way. And so whether you understand it or not, your brain is really working off of patterns and habits. And what a habit really is it's a shortcut. And so one of the things that happens, the brain uses shortcuts like habits, and it does that so it can save energy. And one of the things that's interesting about habits, and that we know from the research, is that whenever you are in a stressed out situation, your body, your brain will go back to habits. It will go back to the thing it knows best. It will use its shortcuts to its advantage. And so if you're catching sort of what I'm saying here now, imagine you have this to-do list and these really good intentions, but then you haven't really changed the stories you're living, and you can't really control the outside stresses that you're going to encounter. And so these stresses come up, and you just go right back into the old pattern, the old habit, the old story that is incongruent with the new to-dos, right? And so isn't this what happens for most of us most of the time when we're trying to change? And so what I'm going to suggest to you in this podcast is that it's not the to-dos that you want to be focused on first. The to-dos are step 2 or 3. The first place to start is to look at the stories that you've been living, which is another way of saying to look at the patterns that you are unconsciously interacting with on a day-to-day basis. The bottom line is, whether you realize it or not, we humans live out of stories. We have a particular identity. And I'm going to use myself as an example for some of this stuff. For example, part of my identity growing up was as an athlete. And more specifically, even though it wasn't conscious to me at the time, I very clearly lived into the, quote, dumb jock story, right? Athletics was cool. School was not. I was an athlete. I was too cool for school. All of this kind of stuff. And this was a story, an identity that I bought into. And part of the reason I bought into it is because my family and my culture really pushed me in this direction, in a sense, from my perspective. Now, if I had my mother and my father and my siblings here with me, they would have some disagreements about this, but it doesn't matter what they think. It's the way I internalized it. Growing up, my oldest brother was the smart one, right? That's the way I internalized it. So his identity to me was the smart brother, the smart kid, the smart sibling. My second oldest brother was the good-looking, beautiful one, right? He was the very attractive brother. My sister was the caring, loving sister. And for me to have an identity, I'm not going to try to be the smart one, right? This is kind of the way the brain works if we want to kind of carve a niche out for ourselves. And this is very much the way we do this as children. And I certainly didn't see myself as the good-looking one. So I saw myself as the athletic one. That seemed to be the things that I got accolades for. That seemed to be the thing that I excelled at the most when I was young. And I just bought into that identity. Now, think about now what happens as I'm going through high school and going through life, operating from the dumb jock story. The idea that athletes are, not necessarily smart. And all the good athletes that I looked up to, right, were not necessarily out, bragging about the books they were reading and, how well they could solve a math problem. They were out there on the tennis court or throwing the ball around or, on the wrestling mat, and they were just practicing all the time. So that's the identity that I lived into. Now, the problem with that is that I also had aspirations about being something other than an athlete. And those aspirations started to crop up around the time I was a senior in high school. And so all of a sudden, the dumb jock story was at odds with, I might want to go to medical school, which means it is at odds with the smart guy story. And so I had to begin to look at an identity and was confronted with an identity of, okay, am I the dumb jock or am I the smart guy? And in a sense, I didn't like either one of those at that point, right? I was sort of in between. So I was like looking at this and being like, well, I need to craft a story about being a smart athlete, right? Now, nowadays, it's a little different. When I was coming up, nowadays, there's research that actually shows, obviously being active and all of this kind of stuff does make us smarter. So there's a strong argument that really athletic pursuits and exercise and all this kind of stuff stimulates the brain and helps us be smarter. All this wasn't known back then. So this dumb jock story was a real sort of thing in the culture at the time. It's not like it was today. And this created this identity schism between who I identified as and who I wanted to be. And so one of the things I did without even being fully aware at the time is I began to really rearrange my life in a sense. And it's funny because later on, I learned through some of my studies, in mindset and psychology, some of the things that I was doing. But one of the first things I did at that time was I started to dress differently. And I actually, one of the funniest aspects of this, I actually bought a pair of glasses. I didn't even need glasses at the time, but I bought a pair of glasses and I started wearing them around school. And I don't know why I did this or where I even got this idea from, but all of a sudden I started showing up at school midway through my senior year, basically, or at the beginning of my senior year, dressing different, wearing glasses. And one of the things I also did was, and this was a huge, big move for me because at the time at my high school, it was like a shocking sort of thing that I quit the football team in my senior year, right? You know, so everyone was thinking, hey, maybe I was going to go play college football or whatever it was going to be. And I just stopped doing it. Like I started wanting to identify with something else. Now, the reason I'm telling this story is because this identity that I had of the dumb jock, and then this new identity I wanted as someone who would go to medical school and someone who could do well in college, this created a disconnect, right? Now, if I had just said, well, I want to map out a bunch of to-dos to do, and I still had this identity of the dumb jock, then my brain is going to keep being like, I don't believe you, Jade. Like, you're a dumb jock. You're not these things that you're trying to do. And so I started dressing different. I started to look in the mirror. When I looked in the mirror, I looked different. I started thinking different. And the other thing I started doing is I started reading. Now, at the time, I was not interested in reading pretty much anything other than muscle magazines and stuff like that. But that's what I started to read. Stuff about nutrition and stuff about exercise and all of that kind of stuff. Now, in this new identity, in this new story, in this new way of living, my brain began to see something very different than it had seen before. And what I'm basically presenting to you is that when your brain begins to see you behave, act, and be in a very different way than you have, it is at that point primed for change. Now, in the context of that new story, adding to-do lists into that can work, but to-do lists by themselves do not. And so, at least from my perspective and what I'm presenting to you, they do not work well. So what I'm going to present for you here today, no matter what you're trying to achieve. Now, the Next Level Human podcast, every time you turn on this podcast, you hear about the 4 jobs, right? Finance, health and fitness, personal relationship, and personal development. Now, most of us, when we want to change, it is almost always going to be one of those 4 things, one of those 4 categories that we're going to want to change. We want to change our relationship to money, make a change in career, improve the way we look, function, and feel, find love, have a better relationship with our siblings, be better socially with people, and matter and make a difference, right? So these are the things that we want to change. So most of you are going to resonate with one of those 4 categories that I just mentioned. Now what you have to do, the first step in my mind before you make a resolution or a to-do list about what you're going to be doing, you have to essentially say, how have I been being that is different? Now this brings us to, before we can go any further, I have to make a distinction between doing and being and really having. Most people think, and by the way, this what I'm getting ready to talk about now actually is not my original framework. I actually got this framework from a self-development course that I did. I've done a ton of these, but one of the ones I did was something called the Forum. Many of you may have, I did this way back in late 90s, early 2000s. Many of you may have heard of the Forum. But I love one of the distinctions they make. They make a distinction between having, doing, and being. And what they say is that most people think that if you have a thing, right, you'll start automatically doing the things that you can do from having something, and then you'll be what you want to be. As an example, most people think if they win the lottery and they get a bunch of money and they make millions of dollars through the lottery, then they'll be able to do all the things they want to do, and they'll be able to be the rich, wealthy person that they've always wanted to be. Except the fact of the matter is, most people who win the lottery, and this is a statistic that really is shocking for a lot of people, and I know you probably heard this because it's pretty well known that most people who win the lottery actually go broke pretty quickly. And the reason why is because their old identity, their old stories, they don't have a story around being wealthy. They have a story around lack. They have a story around spending. They don't know how to budget. They've never been a rich person, and so they keep behaving like a poor person. And many poor people spend money as soon as they get it, don't know how to budget money, overextend themselves. They're not very financially literate, right? And so you can imagine a lot of these people, if you read some of these stories, they're really interesting, right? Because one of the big things is that a lot of people who win the lottery don't realize the taxes they have to pay. So they take this big lump sum of money, and they have to pay almost half of that in taxes. And then they buy this big house and they don't realize about taxes, and they do all these things and they don't realize that they have to pay taxes. And so later on, they get hit with these huge tax bills, then the money's all gone, right? And then they're broke again and worse off than they started. This to me is a good analogy of this wrong idea of have, do, be. It really is be, do, have. And so we have to think about what exactly does it mean to be something, right? This idea of being. Well, if we think about being, we can think about two different aspects of things. When most people think about something, let's say like the law of attraction, they think that they can just think their way into change, right? We probably all heard this idea of thoughts become things, right? And I think most of us who do this work believe that very deeply. I certainly do believe that thoughts can become things, but thoughts need something in between to become things. And that thing is action, right? So you need thinking, you need feeling, and you need action, right? And so what most people do is they miss these two things. There's this idea between I can think a thing, but then I also need to know what it feels like to be doing that thing. And so the best way to think about it when you're rewriting your story is to imagine yourself almost as a method actor, right? Like you're playing a part. Like for me right now, right? This will be shocking to a lot of you listening to this, but in my 4 jobs, believe it or not, finance is something that I've really figured out over the last several years. I've earned really well. I'm learning how to manage and save. Personal relationships, I've always been really great with personal relationships. I have lots of amazing friends. It's not hard for me to, connect with people. It's something that is not hard, never really been hard for me. And purpose and meaning, I feel my life is very purposefully meaningful. Health and fitness is my biggest struggle right now, which would be a shock, I think, to many of you. And so when I'm going to play this method actor, right, I have to go, okay, Jade, what have you been doing and being? More importantly, what have I been being? How have I been thinking and feeling and acting that is incongruent with a lean, healthy, fit Jade, right? And then I go through my day and I say, okay, what is the story that I've been living? Well, the story I've been living is drinking alcohol way too often, right? The story I've been living is eating sweets and foods way too often. The story I've been living is being less consistent in the gym than I have been maybe in my entire life, right? And this is incongruent with a lean, fit, functional person who's going to live a long, healthy life. And this is the thing that we have to understand. So if I'm going to play a method actor, if I'm going to pretend I just got a part in a movie and I'm going to play this lean, fit person, then I'm going to go through my life and I'm going to do sort of audit my life and say, what are the things that I'm doing right now that aren't consistent with being a healthy, lean, fit person? Well, alcohol is not. Sorry, but it's not. Junk food is not, right? These things, it's not that these things can't be done, but most lean, healthy, fit individuals I know drink on occasion. They don't drink nightly. They don't drink most nights. They drink when they're out with friends, and they drink in moderation. And so you have to go through and audit the life and the stories that you are living. You have to think, feel, and act in a way that is congruent with the new story that you want. And so when I wake up, I have to go, okay, my typical day lately, the unhealthy Jade, the slightly overweight Jade, the Jade that doesn't feel great in his skin, stays in bed way too often on his cell phone, going through Instagram and, wasting time that way, wakes up in the morning and sits and reads on the couch, drinking coffee, and maybe way too often has a pastry or something like that, and is not getting up and walking and not doing, having a healthy breakfast or any of those things. So I have to go through my day very carefully and be like, okay, if I want to be this lean, fit, healthy person, then I probably want to get up and do what a lean, fit, healthy person would do. So what would a lean, fit, healthy person do usually first thing in the morning as a priority? Well, they're probably going to do some kind of movement. They're certainly not going to go eat pastries and stuff like that. That is not, they don't go, you don't see a lean, healthy, fit individual, go down to Dunkin' Donuts, get, a dozen donuts and coffee and just sit there eating them on the couch first thing in the morning, right? You don't see that. What you see is they're doing some kind of movement, right? So maybe I go, okay, so the new story I need to live into is I need to move. Now, this is where, sort of the personal preferences sort of come in. So I'm a guy who, I'm not going to get on a Peloton bike probably, right? I might not do yoga or something like that. I'm probably going to go for a long walk or, maybe go do some weight training or something like that. But I'm going to probably prioritize movement. Now I'm going to look and be like, what is a healthy, lean, fit person eating, right? Well, just at the high level, what are they eating usually? Lots of green stuff, lots of lean stuff. Leans and greens, basically, right? Chicken and broccoli, salmon and vegetables, salads, soups, vegetable-based scrambles and things like that, right? They're going to be eating lots and lots of green things and lean things. They're not going to be eating fried food and French fries and cheesecakes and pastas and all of these and junk foods, things out of boxes, right? If I was playing a part in a movie, you would not see me doing that if I was playing the part of a lean, fit, healthy person. I'd be eating apples and, eating salads and chicken and broccoli and things like that. And so hopefully you're getting the point. Before we do these to-dos about what to do, you have to go through an audit and say, what's the story I'm trying to live? What's the way I want to be in the world, which is another way of just saying thinking, feeling, and acting. How am I going to think, feel, and act as I go through my day? What is the new story, the new identity that I want to have? And then I go through and say, what am I currently doing that is in opposition to that? What's the current story that I'm living? And I have to create and map out a new story. I'm sorry to break into the show, but I wanted to take a second to cover one of our sponsors and tell you all about Paleo Valley at paleovalley.com. These are the grass-fed sticks that I tell you all so much about that all of my friends know I have on hand constantly. They are in my car. They are at my house. I keep them at my sister's home and my parents' house. I have these things everywhere because they are the simplest, most convenient whole foods protein supplement you can get. Almost like carrying around pure protein, low-carb protein in your pocket. They also, these Paleo Valley beef sticks, are the only 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef sticks on the market. They use organic spices. They are naturally fermented instead of using nitrates and nitrites that can be a problem in some of these cured meats, and they simply taste fantastic. Check out the original or the jalapeno. Those are my favorites. Please make sure you go over to paleovalley.com and visit. When checking out, use the code NEXTLEVEL for a 15% discount. Remember, our sponsors keep the show going by you giving them your patronage and spending your money on these high quality products. You actually do a few things. One, you're helping to support the podcast. And two, you are helping your health. And three, you are making sure that good quality companies like Paleo Valley can be out there doing their business, changing the world, making the earth better. One of the things you may not know about this is that grass-fed organic and grass-finished beef is doing something that is so utterly important for our environment, actually helping to repopulate the topsoil. A lot of people don't know this, but our topsoil is being extremely depleted, and raising animals, especially cattle, the correct way helps to get that topsoil back. This is one of the reasons why I love Paleo Valley. Not to mention it tastes fantastic, but they're one of these companies, like my other sponsors, Cured Nutrition and Organifi, that are doing the right things by the environment. I really appreciate everything they do, and I hope you will check them out. Thanks so much. paleovalley.com. Use the code NEXTLEVEL. And now back to the show. Now, once I'm there, right, once I understand the old story that I've been living, and I have in place the new story that I am ready to begin to implement, this method acting, this way of being in the world, now I can begin to say, what would the lean, healthy, fit Jade be doing? And by the way, I've been the lean, healthy, fit Jade before. Many of you might look at me now and say, well, you look pretty lean, healthy, and fit to me now. It's really individual, right? I don't necessarily feel that way now. But the reason I bring that up is because the other mistake a lot of people make is they go back to the old story. Well, I once did, I don't know, a keto diet and did lots of high-intensity interval training, and I got fit. So I'll just do that again. Be careful with that kind of approach, because to me, that's another to-do. That's actually not auditing your whole life and actually going in and saying, what is the story I want to live? It's also ignoring the fact that 50-year-old Jade is very different than 25-year-old Jade. So maybe rather than doing CrossFit and all this ballistic stuff, maybe I do want to put in yoga now so I can move better, which is something that I think I want to begin doing because I don't move as well, right? So it's not just about looking good in a six-pack abs anymore at 50 as it was at 25. Now it's about I want to be energetic, right? I want to be vibrant. I want to be healthy, and I want to be able to bend over and tie my shoes without feeling like I'm the Tin Man and like, I'm feeling creaks and cracks everywhere and moving in slow motion. And so it's very important you don't make the mistake of grabbing an old story from your past and trying to bring it forward into your current desires for change. This should be a new story that takes into account your unique psychology, your unique physiology, your unique personal preferences and practical circumstances, right? It should really include all of these things. And then you begin to put the to-dos on. Now, this is very different, right? Because most people have this list of 10 to-dos. So what I'm telling you is throw out the to-dos in the beginning. Begin to understand your old story. Map out your new story and understand that you have to be this thing. It's not just thinking it. It's not just feeling it. It's acting it. If you want a shortcut to this, it's really taking actions, right? Because if you take actions, it's very difficult to take an action and not think and feel what is required to do that action. Now, you can certainly think a thing and think positive thoughts and all of that kind of stuff, but you can't necessarily always feel what you need to feel, nor do you get sort of the brain memory where the brain is actually watching you. And this is the interesting thing about the brain, right? It's watching and judging all of the time. So it is watching you and judging you. It's going, Jade, you're full of shit. I don't see you being a lean, fit, healthy person. What I see you doing is sitting on the couch a lot. I see you going, scrolling through Instagram a lot. I don't see you moving. I don't see you eating the amount of salads. I see you drinking way too much alcohol. So I'm calling bullshit on you. This is what the brain does. Your brain judges you more harshly than it even judges other people. And so you want the brain to be on your side. Now, we know this when we watch other people in the world, don't we? Like, we know that if someone says something and then acts differently, we're just like, yeah, whatever. I don't believe anything you say. We know a lot of people like that. And this is the equivalent of you thinking positive thoughts and not taking the actions. Your brain just goes, whatever. So in a sense, if you're sitting around thinking positive thoughts and not taking actions, it's very much like someone, your friend, talking all this shit about what they're going to do and then never doing it, and then you lose respect for them. Your brain loses respect for you when you say you're going to do something and then you don't do it, or when you're sitting around thinking certain positive things, but you don't take the actions and follow up. You must be in congruency and alignment with this new story. Which brings me to one of the distinctions I want to make here before we get into the final aspect of this particular change episode. There's a very popular saying out there which I find is incredibly misleading. And you've all heard it. It's the statement that goes, fake it until you make it. This is incredibly misleading from my perspective. I do not like it at all. And here's why. Think about what it means to be faking something. Faking means that when people are watching, you are doing everything that you need to do. You look like you're playing the part, right? You're playing the role of this person. But as soon as they're not watching you and you're at home alone, you got your face in a bowl of mac and cheese and you're doing all the things that, aren't, right? So you're putting on a show when people are watching, but as soon as you're alone, you go right back to who you were. That's faking it. Faking it is putting on a show for others and then going right back to a false, to your old self. So your false self is who's showing up for other people. When other people are watching, you're doing the thing. You're being the thing. But when they're not, you're not doing that. That is faking. So this is not about faking it until you make it. It's about being it until you see it. So I like to say it's not fake it till you make it. It's be it until you see it. Now, being it means that when people are watching you, you are living the life of a lean, fit, healthy person, or a rich, wealthy, financially savvy individual, or a socially, emotionally intelligent, socially adept, good romantic partner, all of those things, or a very purposeful and meaningful person. You're doing it when they're watching. More importantly, and it is more important, you are doing it when you are all alone at home, right? Does a lean, fit, healthy person in your mind sit around with a pint of Ben & Jerry's or a half a bottle of wine or a full bottle of wine watching When Emily Went to Paris or some show? Most of them do not. Now, it's not that they don't do it at all. It's just that that is not their priority. They don't come home, throw their keys on the counter, look to get a bunch of food, sit on the couch, and start munching and crunching and watching TV. They don't do that. What they do is they look for opportunities to move. They look for opportunities to relax. So TV is not something that they're doing so they can eat. It's doing something just to recharge and relax and to have some entertainment, right? And so you want to get very conscious about this. Do lean, healthy, fit individuals watch TV? Of course they do. But it's the way in which they watch TV. They're not going to watch, a marathon all night and not go to the gym. And they're not going to, sit there watching TV binging on food, right? And so they're going to balance out TV with movement and the way they eat and all this kind of stuff. So it's really about being it until you see it. Now, once you understand that, and we've kind of done, I think, enough there with this story and this idea of editing your old story for the new story, and then realizing that you have to be this story. You have to live into it. You have to be it until you see it. You cannot fake it. You have to do it when people are watching. You have to do it when they're not watching. You have got to live this thing. It's really interesting because from my perspective, this is hard in the beginning, right? So like for me right now, I'm going through the stage where I'm like, okay, I need to stop having so much alcohol and drinking on a regular basis. So like today, right, I was like, oh, I want a margarita because I was at a Mexican place. And I was like, maybe I'll do a skinny virgin margarita, right? And then I was at a Mexican place, so I basically made a salad. I got some fish tacos. I stripped off the tortillas. This, to me, is more in alignment with a lean, fit individual. Now, it may not necessarily be perfect, but I am being the thing. My brain has registered. It registered today that I did not drink alcohol in the middle of the day at noon. I don't think most lean, healthy, fit people are just going to, on a Tuesday, basically get alcohol and start day drinking, right? Which is something that I have done way too often. And my physique and my health shows the ramifications of that. And so what I'm trying to say here is certainly it will be harder and not necessarily perfect when you're being it, but you don't have to be perfect to be being it. There are many different variations from, being it at level 1, 2, or 3 to being it at level 10. So you do have to give yourself some grace in this process. And this brings me to the to-do part. Because now that you know what you're going to be and the story you're going to begin to live, now you can add in, okay, what are the to-dos that a lean, fit, healthy, or wealthy, some financially savvy person does? And you get very specific with those things. Now, as you make that list, there are going to be some of those things that you're going to see are going to be very difficult for you. For example, you might be like, well, they typically go to the gym most days of the week, or they exercise most days of the week. Now, if you're someone who has not been exercising at all, and you add on a to-do of going to the gym 7 days per week, that's level 10 of being it. We want to start at the least common denominator level, right? We want to say, what is the least common thing that you can be consistent with? Because what it really is about is the lean, healthy, fit person is consistent. right? And so what you do as you begin to be the thing and you're living as a method actor, you begin to say, what is the minimum consistency level I can commit to here and do easily? Because your to-dos should, I have several rules when you're making to-dos. The to-dos should be as easy or preferably easier than the thing that they were replacing. They should be as enjoyable or preferably more enjoyable than the thing that it is replacing. And they should be simple, very simple, those three things, right? So for me, then you basically say, okay, I'm going to start with something that I can do 3 days per week, let's say 1 to 3 days per week of getting in the gym. And I'm going to try to get 10,000 steps, let's say, per day, because walking, I can accumulate that throughout the day. And I'm going to create some rules around alcohol. I'm going to only drink on the weekends, and I'm going to limit my drinks to, I don't know, I'm giving you mine, 3 drinks on Friday and Saturday night, and I'm not going to drink otherwise. Part of that's based on, the research of alcohol. Like, I know that 3 drinks for a guy my size really doesn't seem to have many negative effects, and my body can, deal with that, appropriately. And so this is what I'm going to do with these to-dos now. And also what I suggest is you don't do 10 to-dos. You do 3 big to-dos at most. And what I mean by big to-dos is I mean what we call keystone habits or trickle-down habits. These are things that you choose to do things that have multiple positive ramifications, right? So for example, if I choose to get 8 hours of sleep as one of my keystone habits, this is going to have positive trickle-down effects on hunger, on cravings, on energy, on motivation, on hormones like ghrelin and leptin and insulin sensitivity, and all of these kinds of things, right? That you're going to have a much more positive, mechanism there for you. Think of it as compound interest, right? You're getting these trickle-down effects, these reverberating waves that have a positive impact on you. And you want to pick 3 things that do that make a big difference. So for me, right, for a lean, healthy, fit person, for me it would be absolutely sleep. It would be getting into the gym, 3 times per week and or 10,000 steps a day. Like if you're someone who's never been to the gym and never worked out at all, to me, I wouldn't even tell you to go to the gym. I would say become a walker. Make that your identity first. Become a mover rather than a sitter, and then become an exerciser and a mover, right? See, the point here is when you're looking at these to-dos, and the reason I'm harping on this, because most people go, I'm going to go from a couch potato to a cross-fitting paleo man. And that just does not work. That's a jump way too far. Your brain doesn't know how to bridge that gap. So instead you go, I'm just going to go from a sitter to a mover. And then once you have that down, you go, okay, now I'm going to go from a mover to an exerciser. So for me, I'm already an exerciser. So I'm going to set my bar at 3 times per week. Now, I know I'm pretty good at that because I typically do that anyway. But I'm not going to tell myself to do 6 days per week because I haven't done that in a few years. I'm more going to say I'm going to make sure that I get to the gym 3 times per week and I'm doing 10,000 steps. So that's my movement to do. So I've got my stress-based to do, my sleep. I've got my movement to do. That's a huge trickle-down thing, right? If I'm moving every day, I'm getting into the gym 3 times per week at least. And then I'm going to probably do something around food. It's going to be a pretty big mover. And with food, also, remember, it's simple. So I'm not going to go, I'm going to count macros, count calories, do this and that. I'm going to stay away from gluten. I'm going to stay away from that. This is the wrong way to do to-dos. I'm simply going to do something along the lines of I'm going to have 3 large salads every day. Or I'm going to eat my body weight in grams of protein every day. Now, why would I choose those 2 things? Because they're trickle down, right? If I get 200 grams of protein, I'm 225 pounds right now. But if I know my body, and I also work with enough clients to know that if you just track protein grams and you try to get 225 grams of protein, first of all, I'm not going to be able to eat that. And if I commit to that, it's going to have trickle down effects because I'm going to be full. I'm not going to want a cheesecake after eating, 15 chicken breasts. I'm just not. I'm not going to want any food. Now, if you're a vegan or vegetarian, you can do it along the lines of fiber, right? And salads and things like that. So for me, I'm going to say I'm going to have 3 big salads. Now, a salad to me simply means, leans and greens, some kind of protein source and a bunch of vegetables. And that's going to have a huge trickle-down effect because that gives me the nutrients I need. It gives me, that's low in calories, but I don't have to count calories. It's very nutritious. It is light. It's going to be something that's going to lead to weight loss. But these 3 things, these 3 to-dos, are all I'm going to focus on in the context of my be it until you see it story. This is how I think you should be thinking about change. So before we end, let's just review really quickly, and then we'll go ahead and end the podcast. Most people, when they think about change, they think about to-dos. And they're doing those to-dos in the context of an old story that is incongruent with those to-dos. Not only do they do too many to-dos and to-dos that are too complex, but they don't take any time to think about the current story that they are living and how incongruent that identity is with the to-dos they're trying to do. So step 1 is identify the old story you're living and the old identity, and instead create the new story you want to live into. It's just like me going from the dumb jock to, the smart kid. What I did is I started dressing differently. I started reading. I started doing everything different. And if you can change your environment, yes, you want to do that. You want to ask yourself, what does a lean, fit, healthy person have in their refrigerator? What does a lean, fit, healthy person do after dinner? What does a lean, fit, healthy person do when they wake up? What does a lean, fit, healthy person do when they are eating? And remember, it's not just do, it's how do they think and feel, and most importantly, act, right? How do they be? Being means you're thinking, feeling, and acting in congruence with this new story. So you be it until you see it. Now you know the story you're going to live. Now you know the part you are going to play. Now you are a method actor moving forward, getting ready to play this part. Now, the next step is now you go and say, let me choose 1 to 3 really big rock habits, keystone habits, trickle-down habits, trickle-down ways of being that are going to have multiple powerful impact in this area that I am trying to change, that are easy, enjoyable, and simple. And then you begin to construct those 3 things, and you commit to those 3 things and those 3 things only as if they are your job. You do them when people are watching. You do them when people aren't watching. These are the new ways that you're going to be. Bright lines, right? If you're familiar with some of the education that goes around in addiction, when people are going through addiction, bright lines are these commitments that people make that they must do. And you don't have 10 bright lines. You have 1 to 3. These are the rules of you, the rules of this new story that you're living. And you go out there and you be it until you see it. And you make sure these things are easy, enjoyable, simple, and in alignment with the current level that you are at. You can't go from level 0 health and fitness person to level 10 health and fitness person. You have to be really creative. Now, I gave you some background here in this particular podcast of things that I really would. If you're asking me, hey, Jade, I want to be, it's health and fitness that I'm after, and I do want to start this, I gave you the ones that I'd focus on. Sleep. Go to bed at the same, or wake up at the same time every morning. Why would I choose that? Because if you wake up at the same time every morning, you're going to be guaranteed to be tired around the same time every day. And if you're dealing with insomnia or anything like that, sooner or later that sleep debt is going to build up, and you're going to start getting the sleep that you need, right? So if you want to go to bed at 10, this is an interesting discussion about sleep. If you want to go to bed at 10 every night, the better approach, and you want to get 8 hours of sleep, right? What you want to do is you want to wake up at 6 a.m. every morning. That's the change you want to make, because that'll have a trickle-down effect for you. You wake up at the same time. You set your circadian rhythm. You get tired around 10. You go to sleep. You start getting 8 hours of sleep. That's your first to do. Prioritize sleep. Next to do, become a mover rather than a sitter. Don't try to become an exerciser if you've never been in the gym before. Just start moving. 10,000 steps per day. That is a bright line. You must do it. A healthy, lean, fit person moves, period, end of story, right? You cannot, you can't pretend at this. You cannot fake this. And then finally, you are now a salad eater. You eat salads. You don't eat burgers. You don't eat, tacos. You don't eat ice cream. You eat salads, plain and simple. That's what I eat. I eat salads, and I can make a salad anywhere I go. If every one of my family's going to a burger place, I can get double lettuce, tomato, onion, and strip off the bun. That's a salad. I can go to a Mexican place, get a fajita, tell them leave off the rice and beans, leave off the tortillas. That's a salad. I can also get a salad and add chicken onto it. But those three things are the places that you start. And now in the context of this new story, those to-dos are powerful. They're powerful because they're easy. They're powerful because they're enjoyable for you. They're powerful because they're simple. They're powerful because there are only 3 of them. But mostly they're powerful because they are in the context of you understanding the new story that you're trying to live. I'm going to end right there. Thanks for hanging out on the podcast, everybody. Happy New Year. Sorry it took me a little bit to get this podcast out to you because I know a lot of you wanted to get my take on change. Happy 2022. I will see you at the next podcast.